Hey, welcome to Evolving Waves. My name's Alan Thompson. I'm your host, and I am the CEO of Stingray Branding. I'm honored to have Donovan Rider joining us today, where he is the definition of riding the tides of adversity to reach the shores of success. Donovan has an incredible story. I've been privileged to know this guy for like 10 plus years now. Man, I'm super stoked for this episode. Definitely going to be a good one to tune into. Before we get started off, just want to thank our sponsor, Stingray Branding. If you're looking for a local marketing agency that is able to dial in your marketing anywhere in the country, everything from web design to social media, Google Ads, and everything on and beyond, we are that agency for you. Give us a call or reach out to us at stingraybranding.com. So, Donovan, welcome, my man.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm super stoked to have you on. I've known your story for a while. I've watched the evolution. I will never forget the workouts in Mount Pleasant Park under the
Yes.
bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that park's changed a lot over the years, and it's always funny. Now I take my daughter there years later, and I'll have flashbacks of like burpees or wall balls or something out there.
Dude, I remember pulling up like one workout and you guys I think you guys are like a kettlebell in the car. You're like, here, grab your kettlebell, let's get to work. And I think it was like there was just like four or five of us that were there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was super good times. So you've got an incredible story. I mean, from back in the day, I know that we had talked, and I had heard your story back then, but it had been a while since I kind of refreshed on it. And looking through, doing some research online and stuff before our episode, I was really impressed to kind of hear some of the things that had led you to entrepreneurship. Would you mind kind of just sharing with the listeners what that backstory is? What got you from the beginning to the injury that happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Orangeburg, South Carolina. So not too far from Charleston, super small town, and there wasn't really a lot to do for kids there. I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle, so watching the original Ninja Turtles, and just really enjoyed it. I was walking around the house. Kicking and punching the pillows. My parents were like, "Don't kick the dog." So I wanted to get into something, and so my parents just looked up and asked around, "Hey, are there any martial arts schools in the area?" And the only one happened to be in a rec center. So, and it happened to be Taekwondo, which is what I fell into. So I started doing Taekwondo as a kid, fell in love with it. I was the kid going every day. I wanted to be there every day. I tried football and baseball and a lot of the team sports. As much as I just love sports in general, I found myself liking the fact that martial arts was kind of an individual sport. I enjoyed that a little bit better. And in the 1992 Olympic Games, I was 7 years old when I saw the Olympics. Or sorry, this is 1996 Olympics. I apologize. 1996 Olympics. I was 11 years old, and watching the gymnastics event, my parents were cheering. USA won the gold medal, and I remember asking like, what's going on? Why are my parents cheering for people we don't know? And they explained to me that these are the best athletes in the world. And at that point, I wanted to do that. I wanted the Olympics to be on my resume of life. So I started training a lot. I was the kid waking up early before school, going on runs, training after school at my local martial arts program. Fell in love with competition. I found out that Taekwondo was actually an Olympic sport. It started in 1988 in the Olympics. So there was a pathway here. There was an opportunity that I could turn this dream into reality. So I just became obsessed with it. Started competing in high school at a national level. Did really well. By the time I graduated Korea, I had been to, or sorry, by the time I graduated high school, I'd been to Korea, I'd been to Belgium, I had been to Aruba, Puerto Rico, traveling to compete, and this was something I wanted to do consistently full time. So I decided to actually forego my senior year of high school and join the military, and join the world class athlete program of the United States military.
That's crazy. By the end of high school, you went to all those places and had competed.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah,
That's
and had
wild.
medaled at every one of those locations and at one of those tournaments, and it just kind of every one of those wins just propelled me more on the path of like maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? So it was a great opportunity, and I had an opportunity to train full time while I was in high school. So again, being from a small town like Orangeburg, South Carolina, it wasn't too much of a risk for me in my mind, right? It was like, well, I'm leaving where I'm from, but I have so much opportunity ahead of me. So it was a pretty easy task. I'm fortunate that my parents were on board with it, let me forego my senior year. I moved to Greenville and trained there for a little under a year, and then went straight to the Army program.
So through high school, you've already traveled and done more than like I won't say most Americans, but a decent percentage of the U.S. population. You've already seen more of the world than they will likely ever see. That's wild, right? You're not even 18 and you've already done all this stuff. Um, in terms of so from there you transition into the army. How does that go? Break down kind of the army, the superior athlete program for the army a little bit. I don't think I mean so I've been in 17 years. I don't think I've even heard of that program.
Yeah, most people haven't, and that's what's crazy is even in the military, most people haven't heard of it. So I was fortunate to meet someone that was in that program when I was about 15 years old. And same thing, my dad retired military. He's like, I didn't know you could do this. So a lot of people don't know there's a program called the World Class Athlete Program. The Air Force has one, the Navy has one, the Marines do not have one that I'm aware of. But the major Navy, Air Force, and Army, the most prominent one is the Army. They get the most funding, to be honest. So, but a lot of people don't realize a lot of Olympic boxers, wrestlers, bobsledders, swimmers, shooters. They're all military athletes. A lot of Olympic coaches. When I was there at the Olympic Training Center and in the World Class Athlete Program, I was there from 2004 to 2012, and I would say we probably had at least 15 to 20 athletes that were in our program that represented the U.S. at the Olympic Games.
Wow. So does that program do you go through the normal like basic training and all that stuff too, or is it a totally different journey?
No, it's absolutely the same, right? So, because they always say soldiers first. As you know, I'm sure every unit has their motto. Ours is soldier first because we're considered soldier athletes. So you still have to go to basic training. You still have to have a job. You have to go to your AIT training, and then from there, if you qualify, you get sent directly to that program. But when it comes to that program, it's a as you know in the military, it's an honor to be in the military, but this is even like a higher level in the sense of not everyone gets to do that, right? Like so many people love football, basketball, swimming, but not everyone gets selected to be in that program. So the standards to remain in that program are really high. So every year they set benchmarks for us of athletic endeavors. Hey, if you're going to go to these tournaments, you need to place this high at these competitions. If you don't hit those benchmarks, you will be basically kicked out or dismissed from the program. And you have to remember when I joined the military it was in 2003. I got out in 2012. During that time, we were heavily involved in Iraq and Afghanistan. So what that meant for us was if you were not hitting your benchmarks, there was a great chance that you would be overseas within 30 to 60 days.
Wow. And so if you go through basic and you don't qualify, I'm assuming the same thing, right? And is it one of those positions where they'll basically determine whatever your job's going to be? Like you've washed out of this, we're going to put you in whatever job we want you in.
So the good thing is when you go to basic, you graduate basic, then you go to AIT. So you already have your job selected. And to get into the world class athlete program, I would say 99% of people are pre-selected before they even join the military. So I didn't know that I was going to be in that program, but I knew that I had an opportunity to join it. So, but some people, some athletes, the Army does actually a great job of recruiting athletes that are high level athletes to join the program because, a lot of people don't realize that not everyone's Michael Phelps, right? We're not all getting Nikes and Kellogg deals, right? Most swimmers even it's like they're not getting those types of deals. So what happens is they are working jobs, they're going to college, they're barely making ends meet. That's the beauty about the Olympics, right? Is because they're amateur sports athletes, and unless you consider basketball, right? But most of them are amateur athletes. They're not getting paychecks. So it is really challenging. So the Army can say, hey, join our program. You have to go to basic, you have to go to AIT. However, you're going to get your full military paycheck. If you do 20 years, you're going to get your pension. You have medical, you have dental, we'll even pay for your college. So it's a great opportunity for someone that wants to pursue athletic endeavors if you qualify.
That's incredible. And so through that program, you end up going to the Olympic trials.
I do. Yep. So I went to the trials, the 2012 Olympic Games. The trials were actually in November of 2010 because the way Taekwondo works is once you make the Olympic team, that initial Olympic team, you then have to qualify the weight for the world. So it's not like wrestling where or swimming. It's like, hey, every country can send these. There's so many spots for Taekwondo. The way it works is there's 8 weight classes for men and there's 8 weight classes for women, and then the Olympic weights are only 4 weight classes, and then the U.S. can only send 2 people, right? So every country can only send 2 athletes. So there's a lot. You have thousands of athletes vying essentially for 2 spots for men, and it's a lot of fighting. It's a lot of competition. So once you qualify for the Olympics, you then have to go qualify that weight class for your world, right? So meaning your country's good enough to be in the top 16 athletes in the world for the Olympics. If you don't qualify, no one goes. And sometimes that happens. Fortunately, my year, someone did go. They qualified the weight class, but then we have a second phase of Olympic trials. You have to now that we know we have the weight for the U.S. There's a second phase. You have to fight again. So it takes about a year to a year and a half to figure out who's actually going to the Olympics. So we started in 2010 in November, and unfortunately, that was my last competition as an athlete.
What happened?
So great day. I was having a great year. 2010 was a great year for me. I won nationals. I won athlete of the year. Made collegiate national team. It was a great year for me. Probably my best year ever as an athlete. So I felt great going into Olympic trials. Had been training hard. We actually went up to Aspen for a month to get even higher altitude training while I was out there. And honestly, I felt ready. There was no questions asked that this is where I'm supposed to be right now. And in my third fight, unfortunately, I tore my ACL, my MCL, and my meniscus in my third match. So at that point, my day's over, right? You can't tape the knee up. So my day ended short in my third fight at Olympic trials. And it was a challenging day. I would just remember thinking, this wasn't just like, sometimes you lose a tournament, it's a tough day, but this was it. I mean, this was what I've been training for in my mind since I was a little kid. So the fact that it ended the way it did was mentally challenging for sure. And you have to remember, for me, it wasn't about just winning a national title. I really wanted to pursue the opportunity to be an Olympian. So if I couldn't make this Olympic trials, that meant I had 4 more years. Right, you're not committing for another year; you're committing for 4 more years. And at that point in my life, I'd been gone because I moved away in high school. I'd been gone for 8 years, and during that time, I had lost a really close friend of mine who passed away in South Carolina. My father passed away in South Carolina while I was gone. So I felt like I was missing out on certain things. So for me at that time, it was the right choice to move home.
Man, that's crazy. That's wild to imagine, right? And that's as an agency, we work pretty close with different athletes and promoting them and stuff for the University of Florida, and that's the thing that has always stood out to me and through that process is you spend, like most kids, right? They get to go out and they get to hang out with their friends, they get to play Xbox, they get to goof off, right? Go ride bikes and do all the fun kid stuff. But whenever you're training at the level that like you're training and that D1 athletes and professional athletes are at, they've spent their entire youth dedicated to this one mission, this one goal, most of their off time and all of that downtime they could have had in high school instead of getting to go out and party and do all the crazy story stuff that people come out of high school with and college with. Their whole adolescence is dedicated to this one thing. um, I can imagine getting to that point, feeling that you're there, right? You've made it, and then having it basically ripped away from you.
It was tough because just like you said, I honestly mentally felt like it had been ripped away from me. And what I mean by that is it was a freak accident. There was nothing crazy. I did a move that I had done 1,000 times, right? Or 10,000 times. I just cut the angle and my knee gave out. And I didn't even know what happened at first because the adrenaline's rushing. And so I got up and I shook it off. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good. And we kept fighting. And 2 seconds later, I fell again. And my medical, we had a doctor, our medical team came out. My doctor grabbed my knee. He's like, I think your knee's torn. He's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, well, there's 30 seconds left in the fight. I'm winning right now. If I can't continue, I want to go out on a win. So I kept fighting. And unfortunately, I think because I kept trying to compete for that last 30 seconds, and you got to think this is Olympic trials, right? This guy that I'm standing across from me, he's not taking it easy on me. He knows my knee's torn. He knows that I'm in pain right now. So he turns the fire up a little bit and comes after me. So last 30 seconds is a blur now, but in the moment, it's just kind of fighting for your life, right? Fighting to get through these last 30 seconds. But you're right. I felt like it was kind of stripped from me. I didn't know if it was karma, if it was God, if it was just coincidence. But I felt like, man, I trained so long for this one moment, and that I deserved to be here, and then just have it taken away was pretty tough.
That's wild. So now you have to navigate going through that, right? You have to process the mental emotions that come with it, or the mental health that goes along with it, the emotion that goes along with it, and start making some decisions about what you're going to do, right? Either committing to another 4 years or coming back home. What were some of the thoughts that were going through your mind that you were having to deal with going through this decision making process?
It was really tough. I'll be honest. I'm a Christian, I'm a religious person, and at the time I was really angry with God because I felt like, man, if you were going to tear my knee, why did you do it now? Like, why couldn't you have done it 2 weeks ago in training? Why have to do it here? So I was just really angry. And even then, I had a lot of friends fly out from South Carolina that hadn't seen me compete in 7 or 8 years. My mom flew out. My mom hadn't seen me compete since I joined the military. So I'm like, man, all of my friends and family are here. And then my third fight, this is what happened. So I was really angry, and it took a long time of self-reflection and introspection to realize that life happens for you, it doesn't happen to you. And I'm really grateful now that it did happen then, because I was able to experience competing at the Olympic trials, from the weigh-in to the walkout to the butterflies the night before, the butterflies the morning of. I'm super grateful for that. But it was challenging because I went from, again, training at peak performance levels to a week later I'm having knee surgery. And I remember the next day we're going to rehab, and the doctor says, "Hey, hop on the bicycle. We're going to do 5 minutes on the bike. Just kind of loosen your knee up so we can stretch it out." And I remember looking at him saying, "I can't bend my knee enough to get onto the bike." He's like, "Oh, it's okay. That's okay. Come over here and we'll start something else." And it was just such a moment of like, I was so humbled to go from, man, I'm competing at the Olympic trials, to a week later, I'm walking with a cane, with a walker. It was very humbling, and mentally it did challenge me. So I stayed in the military another about 7 months because I had to rehab my knee. The military cannot release you right when you have active injuries, so they had to make sure I was taken care of, and they did a great job. But that gave me the opportunity because my team was still competing. So at that point, I was able to kind of become an assistant coach in our program and help my team while I rehabbed. So I got to travel. We went to nationals in California. I was able to go to Brazil for 2 weeks for the World Games. So it was a great opportunity for me to now give back, and that also lit that fire in me to think of like, what is next at this point. I decided that I wanted to go home, but I mean, you have to remember, I've never had a job. Like, I've only done Taekwondo. I left high school, and then joined the military. So I've never had a real job. So for me, it's like, well, what's next? Like, I don't know, corporate America. Like, what do you do? I don't know how you qualify for that, right? What's next for me? Um, but becoming that coach in that program the last 6 months ignited that fire in me to think of, hey, this is something that I would like to pursue full time. And then I moved home to South Carolina.
Going through the injury and that whole basically about a year transition period, what were some of the lessons that stand out to you through that time period?
I think it's important for anyone, but especially athletes, and this is great for high school athletes, college athletes, is one, don't define yourself by your athletic career, right? So many times we see athletes that missed the game winning shot or had the injury, and in their mind, they've attached their identity to being an athlete. And now when you're not an athlete, it's like, who are you? All right, I've seen it at the highest levels, even in our sport. You got guys who are Olympic champions, world champions, and they just keep competing a little bit too longer than they should. And I think it's because, one, they love the game, they love the sport. But number two, I think their identity is so wrapped around being an athlete that they don't really know who they are. And it takes some time to figure out what is next and what are those opportunities. So, number one, I think you should attach your identity around just being a hard worker, being someone that can do tough things, being someone that has discipline, someone that has consistency, someone that can set a goal and achieve that goal. I think that's a much better opportunity for identity than it is, I'm an athlete.
That makes a lot of sense. I think you see the same thing with the military, right? Whenever people get out and retire out that have been in that capacity forever, some utilize it really well and know that they mastered so many great skills through the military, and some are like, I was a chief master sergeant or brigadier general or whatever, and they move on and they're like, I don't know what to do now. I don't have anybody to command. I can't walk into the office and be like, go do that.
Yeah. That's
Right.
it's a perfect parallel. I mean, again, to being a military myself, you're right. When they attach their identity to that, they get out. It's like, what's the purpose? And I think as humans, we need a purpose. And as an athlete, it's simple. It's like train, get better, win the games, win worlds, win the Olympics, whatever your mission is. And as a soldier or as an airman, it's you have a mission, right? You have something to work towards. And the challenge is when you become as we use the term civilian, when you become a civilian and you're not an athlete, you're not a soldier, you're not an airman, what do you do now? Like, who are you? And that can be a challenging thing for a lot of people.
You take the experience of the Olympics, take the experience of the military. You have that question in front of you, and you come back to South Carolina and decide to go in entrepreneurship. Where, obviously, knowing what you do now, Taekwondo makes sense. But walk us through kind of that journey of getting back to South Carolina, figuring out what you're going to do, maybe selecting where you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, and some of the insights that went into planning that out.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to come home to South Carolina. To me, it's just always been home. Even though I lived in Colorado for 8 years, it's like South Carolina just feels home when you're here. So I was excited to get back, but didn't want to go back to Orangeburg, South Carolina. So growing up, I loved the beach, I loved the water, I loved visiting Charleston. So for me, it was like, hey, I'm going to move to Charleston. And fortunately, I had a friend who was moving. She lived in Greenville at the time, and she was like, hey, I'm moving to Charleston. I need a roommate. And I heard you're considering moving. I was like, yeah. So it actually worked out. We ended up being roommates. We lived on James Island, and it was great. We were roommates for about a year and a half. She met a guy, moved to California, and they got married. But for me, I moved home. I didn't really know anyone, and again, that's kind of during that transition period of what am I doing with my life. So my first year in Charleston was 3 or 4 days a week at the beach. I was going to the pool. Living off savings. Fortunately, I am a saver, so I've been saving a lot of money when I was in the military. So I was able to kind of afford myself about a year of living expenses to kind of hang out and figure out what I want to do. And then when it really came down to it, again, I didn't really have other experiences outside of doing Taekwondo. And then obviously from my background, I love Taekwondo. I love martial arts. And so I said, hey, this is what I want to do. So I decided to start teaching, but remember, I'd used a lot of my savings to live for a year. So, you start getting into business, and it's not one of those if you build it they will come type of things, right? It's harder than people think it is. And the way it first started was the actual park where you mentioned earlier, waterfront park. I would walk around and I printed out business cards on pieces of paper. I had to go buy a printer, and in my bedroom, I printed out little business cards that just said, hey, here's who I am, here's my background. And I'd walk around to parents in the park and say, I'd love to work with your kid. A year ago, I went to Olympic team trials. And again, this is 2012. So this is when the Olympics are happening. So I was thinking, man, this is when I need to capitalize on this, right? That buzzword is happening. So I was passing out cards. The first time I passed out about 500 cards around the Charleston area, and I had one person call me back. And it was a great lesson. I was like, man, like you said earlier, like, no, who are you now? No, these people don't know you. They don't really care about your story, right? They're probably looking back. I was like, I wouldn't probably hire a kid that walked up to me in a park either to work with my child. You know what I mean? Um, but I fortunately got like 6 or 7 kids eventually that would train with me. And then I was like, man, I need to have a place to do this. So I actually reached out to a rec center in Mount Pleasant, and there was the reason we started in Mount Pleasant is the only rec center in the area that had an open spot that would let me do it. And so I taught Mondays and Wednesdays, one class on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I ended up getting to not a lot, honestly, to about 12 kids or so. And at that point in my mind, I was like, man, like I'm in a rec center, like these people aren't taking me seriously. Like I'm not taking myself seriously. And maybe that's a limiting belief, but in my mind, that's how I believed it. And I felt like I have to go. I got to go bigger. I got to go all in on this. So at that point, Jeremy Feldman, who mutual friend, we've been talking. He still lived in Colorado, and I was like, man, what if we start? What if we do Taekwondo? What if we do this for real? Um, and we had this concept after going back and forth of speaking. He really wanted to capitalize and really enjoyed fitness and CrossFit at the time. This is 2012. CrossFit, it's only a couple years old, and I really like the martial arts. So we said, hey, man, what if we have two buildings, two businesses right next to each other. Parents can be taking classes, but at the same time, the kids can take a martial arts class, build their confidence, build their self-esteem, their perseverance, and we can parents can kill two birds with one stone. So fortunately, Charleston's not a hard place to convince people to move to, and he ended up moving here. We started that gym, and that was in October of 2012.
Wow. I don't think I even knew the backstory behind that. That's incredible. Kind of fast forwarding some of the journey, right? So I know that you guys go through. I was part of that initial group that had joined. Super fun experience. Man, I was fit back then. For those that are watching, do not judge my current status by what Donovan and Jeremy were educating me to do back then. It is completely different.
You got a beast. He's got a beast in there.
The those were some wild workouts. CrossFit was intense, and I remember the layout of that. The two businesses side by side, and you would walk up, and yeah, I remember the kids could like walk right over to Taekwondo, and then you walk right into CrossFit Frequency and blaring music, and you're pounding it and working it, and you're ready to die by the time the workout's over. And it's like, all right, kids, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you, I know that since then there's been some transitions and whatnot. I know Jeremy exited the business and went into real estate. You continue on with Charleston Taekwondo, and you're now at 11 studios, right?
So we're opening number 9. We've opened 11. I've opened 11 brick and mortar locations in 11 years, but 3 of them I've exited from.
Okay, so we're at 9 studios.
Yeah.
Um, so personally, we're getting ready to go through a big transition with expansion and stuff as well. And previously, I was in a business that had networking groups throughout the Southeast, and had done a really good job growing them here. And while it was a lot of time involved to get multiple groups and multiple leaders and things to work, it was manageable. As soon as I started trying to scale outside of the area, it became really difficult to keep quality control and things of that nature. What are some of the processes and things that you put in place to help make each of these locations successful and to be operating the right way whenever you're not there, and all of those things?
It's a great question, and that is the $1 million question: is uh, how do you make sure that you have congruency across all locations? Our mentality for, and not that I'm promoting McDonald's, but it's like, McDonald's burger in South Carolina and California, it tastes the same, right? The experience is typically the same, the layout's the same, everything's the same. So for us, it was very important, from that first Charleston Taekwondo, just like, it's like you have your hand in everything, man. Like you're cleaning the toilets, like you do everything, right? And it doesn't sound like a lot, but how do you clean a toilet, right? Clean is relative to different people. So, we have a very important part of our business is customer service, right? Making sure that we make people feel like family. I always say that people quit gym memberships, but they don't quit family, right? So if you can make people feel a part of who you are, your mission, and what you're doing, they're much more likely to stay longer. And I think a lot of that is that customer service, right? Customer service with a smile is highly underrated in today's society. So as we grew, at first it just grew more of what I had to do, to be honest. So I worked even more hours. But as I got married and had children, I had to release some of that, right? And it's hard to do when you're a type A person. But now what we've been able to do is, number one, hiring great people, right? Certain things have to be, as my mentor says, certain things have to be factory installed. If I have to tell you to be on time, you're probably just not a right fit for our person, for our business. If I have to tell you to smile when you talk to people, if I have to tell you to greet everyone that walks into the building, like hopefully those things are just innate and that's who you are. And all I have to do now is train you in the skills of what we're doing. So number one, I think it's hiring and identifying great people. Number two is systemizing. We try to do everything across the board. So we don't just teach martial arts classes. For us, we plan our curriculum months ahead. We film it months ahead, and then our teams get to study that content before we actually even release it to our students and run classes. So there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes before it actually gets to the members. And then beyond that, now we have layers of leadership, and it's something I heard from a good friend of mine here in Charleston honestly about 7 years ago now. He's like, you have to have layers of leadership. I didn't really know what that meant. I'm like, I got 2 locations. I don't know what layers of leadership means. But now we do have that, So I am the founder, the CEO of the company, but we have 2 director of operations that basically kind of like regional managers. So they each oversee, one oversees 5, one oversees 4, and then they're tied to those businesses. So they get to oversee the operations. They spend a day every week just with that team, open to close, making sure that everything is congruent, right? That it's they're doing it the way they're supposed to be doing it, coaching the team and making sure they're doing it the right way. And that's been probably the best part of our ability to grow, has been bringing on great people and putting them in positions to lead, so I don't have to be involved in everything.
And that's like you said, it's the $1 million question. That's the question that most business owners can never figure out, is how to get themselves out of the daily operations so that they can actually go spend their time on business development, acquisitions, growth, and then maintaining that quality through. So now your director of operations is literally fulfilling the role that you used to fulfill.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that's awesome. They do exactly what I do. Yeah.
So whenever you go to open up a new location, are you the one spearheading that now, or is your director of operations basically leading that
Yeah,
charge?
great question. So we're shifting. So location 8 just opened in March in Hanahan, South Carolina. We did about 50-50 on it. So I really would tell him what to do and kind of coach him through the process. And then honestly, just kind of like look over his shoulder a lot and check things out. However, with location number 9 that's opening right now in Carnes Crossroads, he is 100% doing it on his own. He just, hey, if you have questions, give me a call. And it's been fun to watch. It's been tough to watch sometimes because he comes to me and says, hey, what about this? And I'm like, I could have helped you with that a month ago if I knew about that. So I think it's a learning process, but you're right. That became the next bottleneck, right? So now I'm out of the business. I'm just opening locations. But again, I can only open one, maybe two locations a year. Well, what if we want to open 4 locations? I became the bottleneck once again. So I had to figure out a way to get myself out of that role also.
That that makes total sense to me. So looking at, I mean, you've built one of the most successful Taekwondo businesses, right? Basically, in at least South Carolina,
Yeah.
if not maybe the Southeast. I mean,
I,
I know you're coaching others now,
yeah,
and
yeah, we have the biggest program in South Carolina, and then I would say one of the more prominent programs in the Southeast.
what are some of the lessons or things that you attribute to the success of walking through that process from a personal leadership perspective, not necessarily a business or operations perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, leadership is the problem and leadership is the solution. So if your business isn't doing what you want it to do, it's because you lack the leadership to get it where it needs to go. So that means leadership is the solution. So I think it's important that you're always having mentors, you're connecting with other school owners, you're connecting with other business operators that are just a little bit further ahead of you so that you can pick their brains. A lot of times, I think business owners think they need to have the most expensive mentor, the person way farther down the path. But sometimes it's hard to connect to them because they're so much further down the path than you that maybe they forgot what it's like to be in your shoes a little bit, right? You really just need someone 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, copy what they're doing, and then that way you're continually moving forward. But I would say number one is just pure leadership, right? Any successful business that you know on this planet, they have a great leader at the helm. Leading the operations, and then always I just give the shout out to my team. Again, they're the ones that do the day to day. They're the ones that handle the parent complaints, or they're the ones that get to hold the boards, and when the kids get the new belts, they get to be a part of that. So everything we've built is 100% due to our amazing team.
So let's touch on mentors for a second. That's something that you hear about often. I think in business, it's something that's recommended often, but it's, I think, much more of a challenge than what people actually take it to be. I think that there, a couple of roadblocks that come to mind that I've personally have experienced and that I know that I've heard other people mention are, number one, competition, right? Like if you're a super competitive person, finding somebody in the same industry that's basically a competitor at a different level, to then do outreach and be vulnerable with. And then number two, how do you like? So number one is how do you kind of overcome some of those things in your mind? I know you being a competitor probably had some of that as well. And then number two, how do you like? What was your process in terms of you going through and selecting your mentor that you picked initially, and then moving on from mentor to mentor?
No, it's a great question. I 100% recommend everyone has a mentor. I mean, even normal, like moms or dads, or just at least be a part of a group of people that are in that same kind of experience you're going through. But as far as one, so let's talk about selecting a mentor. I think it's super important that a lot of people will see status or they'll see results, and they're thinking, man, I want those results, so I'm going to hire that mentor. And I don't think that's always the greatest thing to do. I think it's more important to find someone that you align with. And what I mean by that is someone can be super successful, but if they're cheating on their wife, no one wants to be around that, right? Or if they're working all the time, sure, the business is great, it's kicking off cash, but they're working 70 hours a week. I personally don't want to work 7 hours a week. So I want the result, but I don't want to do what they're doing to go through it, right? So I think it's more important to find someone that you align with. For me, right, typically being a dad, being a business owner, it's like, would I trust this person? Would I potentially trade places with this person? Do I look up to this person? Do I value their opinion? Like, are they faithful to their wife? Do they make sure that they're having quality time with their kids, right? Do they take care of their team? Do they give back to charities and run events like that? That means more to me than any amount of money that they're making. So that's how I've selected my mentors over time is people that I align with. And I don't have to necessarily align with their entire life, but there has to be something about it that I'm like, I would like more of that in my life. So I think it's super important to identify more on a personal level who you connect with more than a results level. And then as far as finding someone, you know, There's a couple of ways to do it. A lot of people, our mentors are expensive. I'll be honest. I worked with Bedros Keuilian for 2 years. He's $100,000 a year, and that includes one call a month for 30 minutes. It's $8,300 for one call for 30 minutes, and I get to fly out there twice a year and spend the day with them. People say, "Wow, that's crazy." It was worth every penny. In our, especially in our industry where the average coach is probably $1,000 a month, we're paying $8,300 a month. And that's something that I think that has helped us grow our business, is that I haven't sought mentorship inside the martial arts space. I sought it outside of the martial arts space. And the reason I chose Bedros is because, one, I respect him. I like his leadership style. I like that he values fitness at his age, that he takes care of his family, that he gives back to charity, but also he owns a massive fitness franchise, right? I think they have 600 plus locations. And not that that's not our goal, however, but I'm like, if we're going to expand, if we're going to open new locations, he'll definitely be able to help me do that, right? If my goal is 25, well, he's on 600, so he can help me definitely get to 25. So again, $100,000 is a lot of money, but since hiring him, and we've grown by 1 to 1.5 million a year by having him. So I would honestly argue that $100,000 is pretty cheap for the result that we were able to get.
Drop in the bucket for that kind of explosion.
But it's up to you to do the work, right? A lot of people could say, man, that's not worth it. But the reason it's not worth it is because you're not going to do the work. You're not going to take the advice. You're not going to do what they're telling. No mentor, it's only worth it if you take the advice and actually do something with it.
Man, that's so true. That's for me, what has stood out, at least through my own business journey, has been that one piece, right? You can teach it, you can tell it, you can share it, you can describe it, but if the person receiving doesn't actually put in the effort to take it and apply it, and not just apply, but monitor, optimize, right, continue to tweak and refine, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many books you read, it doesn't matter how many podcasts you listen to. If you're not willing to take the stuff that you learn in those moments, those ahas, and apply them, it's just wasted information.
It is, yeah. We always refer to them in kind of our sphere as success zombies, right? They're always reading the latest book. They're always in the latest Facebook group. They go to the latest conferences, but their business isn't growing. They've been doing this 3, 4, 5 years, and the business is still stagnant. It's not the information; it's you. Maybe instead of spending the money and going to this conference, why don't you just pick up the phone and start dialing, right? Like that's going to give you a way better ROI, because even then, even if you fail, you're like, well, I'm not making sales right now, so I need to go to this conference on sales. You'll learn more by failing in sales than you will probably from a sales conference. Just start getting the reps in now, and you will fail forward.
100%. Yep, 100%. It's funny, before we jumped on and started recording, I was talking about, recently coming into 10X and starting to be part of their culture and sphere and stuff last year. And then we had been sitting stagnant in revenue for about 3 years prior to going to that conference. I'm like, I need something to just change my mindset, I got to figure something out. I need to figure out profitability better. I need to get my margins bigger. And 10X had been running an ad on Facebook for the employee profitability calculator. Now I did it and I was like, whoa, like my numbers are way off from where they should be on this. This is crazy. I want to go learn this one thing. So I bought a VIP ticket, flew out to Arizona, went to the conference. With literally out of a 3-day conference, I wanted one bit of information. And I went in and we're going through the marketing part, right? So the conference I went to has multiple segments, and we're going through this. One of the segments is marketing, and one's sales, and so on. So we're going through the marketing part, and he's like, stand up, record a 10-second video with everybody behind you and be like, I'm here at 10X, we're killing it, have a great day, and then send it to somebody. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I don't know. I hate being on camera. Okay. Isn't that ironic? Yeah. Right? So we go through and I do it. I'm like, this is super awkward. I don't want to do this. And I do it. And then afterwards he's like, how many of you haven't even bothered to post about your business, share what you're doing, tell anybody that you're doing it? How many people don't even know you're here? Like, how many of you came in here, you've been here for 2 days, and you didn't even bother telling anybody that you were at one of the largest business conferences in the world?
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, that's me. Yeah, absolutely. And I realized that I had gotten so much information about content and all this other stuff, and what I hadn't been doing for the last 3 years was actively utilizing it personally to grow, right? Launching a podcast, kicking in SEO and bigger ads, dialing in ad strategies, being at networking events, all the things that had built the business for the first 10 plus years. I had completely abandoned for about a 2 to 3 year period starting through COVID.
Right.
And the revenue matched it, matched the intensity, matched the effort, matched the drive. And we shifted all of that, right? I took all that information that I learned there and the other things that I've been accumulating over the last couple of years. I'm like, all right, let's start doing this. And in the last year, we've been on this like freight train of systems, right? Deploying systems and control measures and trying to reorganize our processes and structures and getting more efficient. And now launching this podcast, right? Now I've gone from I don't want anybody to even know that I exist to let's get in front of the camera all the time and put out all this content constantly with my face on it. And it's just that profound. Like you have to be willing to take whatever you're hearing and do something with it, or it doesn't matter how much you learn. And if there's one thing that I hope that well, not one thing, because there's so many ahas that come out of this. So I hope that somebody listening, like if you're driving, I hope you pulled over and like took notes, because there's a lot of good stuff that came out of this podcast so far. But with all that stuff that you heard, if you don't do the thing that Donovan just said, it doesn't matter all the other stuff that you heard, other than maybe helping with some mindset.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up here, I got one more question for you. It's a one that I like asking everybody whenever I come in across them is, so what's next for your life?
No, great question. So for us, it currently is in the business aspect is again, we're opening number 9 right now. We want to have 25 locations by 2030. So it gives us about 5, 6 years to grow. We need to grow about 3 a year is what we need to grow by. So that's the big goal right now is 25 in 5 is kind of what some people say, or 25 by 2030. So that's our goal right now. We want to be the premier martial arts program in the Southeast. That's our goal. We do not have any aspirations to franchise or license or anything like that. I like owning the businesses. I like being a part of it. One thing that we do unique in our locations is the head instructors that do really well, and we align with them because business is like a marriage. So if we align with them and it's a good fit, we actually give them the opportunity to buy into their locations, so they get ownership in them, right? So not only do they get their salary, they're getting owner draws, and they're getting more money and more opportunity to grow not only our brand but to grow their financial wealth and their future wealth. So I'm excited about that. We like to personally own them and partner with school owners that we want to be a part of. So that's professionally. But when it comes to personally, that's a great question. Spend more time with my family. I love being home with my wife. I love being home with my daughter. From being an athlete, traveling constantly. I mean, we used to travel at minimum once a month. Every year when I was in the military, we would leave and go do a training camp for about 2 months. So it was usually 60 to 70 days. I'd be gone away from my friends when I was in Colorado. And I think all those years of traveling now, I really just don't enjoy it anymore. I would much rather just be hanging out with my daughter in our pool or at the park with her, or going on a date with my wife. So when it comes to personally, just keep doing what we're doing.
I actually have one more question for you, one alibi. So wrapping everything together, what would you say are maybe one, or if it's not just one, maybe like the top 3 things as you reflect back on your time going through training for the Olympics, the adversity from the injury, transitioning, and where you are now? What are kind of the top 1 to 3 lessons that you've implemented that have allowed you to be where you are today?
No, it's a great question. I would say a couple things. Number one, when it comes to uh, number one is just self development, right? And that doesn't have to be going to or going to conferences or anything like that, but it can be. That can be a part of it. It could be reading a book. I think it's going for walks and just internal reflection and talking to yourself. I think always trying to level up. What's one thing that you can do a little bit better, right? Well, I think the saying is, if you get 1% better every day, you're like 38 times better at the end of the year, right? Like, what's one little thing that you can do a little bit better today? Can we sub out this meal for this meal? Can we wake up 15 minutes earlier and get a little bit of reading in? Always pushing yourself for self development. I think another thing is, like you mentioned yourself, just take action, right? Like money loves speed, wealth loves time, and I think all of life success just loves action, just taking massive action. When you want something, do you really want it, right? Like I gave up high school my senior year. You know what I mean? Fortunately, my parents put their foot down, but like, look, you can leave school early, but like graduation, I had a tournament that weekend, and I was going to skip my high school graduation, and my parents were like, put their foot down. They're like, no, you have to do it. Like you're going to regret this later, and I'm thankful I did. But but that was like the level of intensity that I grew up with was this more than anything, right? Like willing to give up friends, family, all comfort zone, just take massive action. And then as far as our business, I think no matter what business you're in, we are in the service based business. Definitely customer facing, but no matter what industry you're in, again, I think service with a smile is underrated. I think putting other people first, whether that be putting the customer first, putting your team first, putting everyone else first. And I think ultimately the law of reciprocity, it'll come back to you.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. Thanks for being here,
No, I
man.
appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Yeah.
For those that are listening in, as we kind of wrap up today's episode, remember that in the face of adversity, there is always the potential for growth, resilience, and success. Join us next time as we continue to explore inspiring stories of overcoming challenges and fixing and thriving in the journey of life. This is Alan Thompson signing off.